Let's dive into APUSH period 4, the Age of Jackson, spanning from 1824 to 1840. This era is key in American history, marked by significant political shifts and the rise of Andrew Jackson, a figure who reshaped the country's democratic landscape. During this period, we'll see how Jackson's presidency influenced the political system and brought about changes that still resonate today. The age of Jackson is not just about one man's rise to power, but also about the broader democratic expansion and shifts in political alliances. As we explore this timeline, keep in mind the key themes of political transformation and the evolving role of the presidency. Let's uncover how these developments set the stage for the modern American democracy. Let's look at the election of 1824. This election marked the end of the so called era of good feelings. All four presidential candidates identified as Republicans, which might seem surprising today. They were John Quincy Adams, Henry Clay, Andrew Jackson, and George W. Crawford. Now, here's where things get interesting. Andrew Jackson won the popular vote. However, nobody secured a majority of electoral votes. This meant the decision went to the House of Representatives. This situation set the stage for what would later be known as, quote, the corrupt bargain. But we'll delve into that in just a moment. Remember, this election not only altered political alliances, but also set the stage for future conflicts. Let's move on to explore how these events unfolded further. The corrupt bargain. The 12th Amendment played a pivotal role here, requiring the House of Representatives to choose among the top three candidates when no one secured a majority electoral vote. This is where Speaker of the House Henry Clay enters the picture. Clay, who shared similar views with John Quincy Adams on the American system, decided to support Adams. Not long after Adams was declared the winner, Clay was appointed Secretary of State, a position that was considered a stepping stone to the presidency, as history has shown with three of Clay's predecessors. To Andrew Jackson supporters, this arrangement smacked of impropriety, leading them to label it the corrupt bargain. They believe Adams had effectively bribed Clay with this prestigious position to secure his support. In fact, a caricature from 1825 even depicted Clay metaphorically sewing Jackson's mouth shut, symbolizing the silencing of Jackson's rightful claim to victory. This episode fueled significant distrust and resentment, setting the stage for contentious political climate that followed. Let's take a closer look at John Quincy Adams. You might know him as the son of John Adams, but he carved out his own legacy. John Quincy Adams traveled extensively with his father in Europe during the American Revolution, which gave him a global perspective that served him well in his career. As Secretary of State, he was a foreign policy legend. His accomplishment included the Rush-Bagot Treaty, the British-American Convention, the Adam-Onis Treaty, and of course the Monroe Doctrine, a cornerstone of American foreign policy. However, his presidency was fraught with difficulties. Adams never secured a majority of support, with allegations of corruption lingering about the controversial election of 1824. This controversy contributed to the split of the United Republicans from the era of good feelings, resulting in two factions: the National Republicans rallying behind Adams and the Democratic Republicans with Jackson. Despite these challenges, Adams' influence on American policy was significant and long lasting. The election of 1828 was a turning point, marked by a campaign that was notably contentious. It's often described as, quote, dirty campaign, with intense personal attacks flying from both sides. Despite this, Andrew Jackson emerged victorious, decisively defeating John Quincy Adams in what was essentially a rematch. Now, here's where it's particularly significant. Jackson becomes the first president hailing from the West, a symbolic shift in power and representation. Jackson's appeal lay in his image as a common man. This was a departure from the previous elite dominated political landscape. His victory signaled a broader acceptance of a more inclusive, if still limited, democratic process, one that resonated with many Americans of the time. Jackson's election set the stage for the democratization movements that would follow, profoundly impacting American society and politics. Today, we're going to look at the democratization of American society. During this era, significant changes reshaped the electoral landscape. Most states removed property requirements for voting, opening the doors for the poor and uneducated to cast their votes. This was a monumental shift, as it eventually led to universal white male suffrage. Andrew Jackson's inauguration symbolized a triumph for the common man. He was the first perceived populist candidate, truly seen as the man of the people. This notion of populism comes from the Latin word populi, meaning people or nation, highlighting his connection to the broader populace. Jackson's appeal lay in his identity as one of them, giving voice to those historically excluded from the political process. This change was not just about voting rights, it was about who was felt represented in the corridors of power. As we continue, we'll explore how these shifts influenced the political processes and systems that followed. Initially, from 1790 to 1828, we had the caucus system in place. This was when a small group of party insiders would select the candidate. It was quite exclusive. Then, after 1828, we saw a shift to the party convention. This change allowed broader participation, as members from across the political party could now nominate candidates. It reflected a step towards greater democratization. However, this era wasn't without its flaws. The introduction of the spoils system meant that political supporters were rewarded with political office. Andrew Jackson defended this system, arguing it was democratic. But as you might guess, it led to corruption and ineffectiveness. These changes lay the groundwork for how political nominations are handled today. It's fascinating to see how the seeds of our current system were sown in this era. The nullification crisis. This was an intense and pivotal moment in American history. First, let's talk about the Tariff of 1828. It was very unpopular in the South, earning its nickname, the Tariff of Abominations. Why did it pass? Well, it was a combination of Northern special interests and political maneuvering to support Andrew Jackson's election. Now, what's crucial here is the rise of sectionalism. This tariff starkly highlighted the growing divide between the North and the South. Southerners, particularly in South Carolina, were deeply unhappy. They published the South Carolina Exposition, penned by John C. Calhoun, which laid out the nullification theory. This theory suggested that states could nullify federal laws they found objectionable. Remember how the Sedition Acts led to the Kentucky and Virginia Resolution? It's a similar concept of challenging federal authority. The Tariff of 1832 only added fuel to the fire, leading South Carolina to approve the nullification and refuse to collect the tax. They even threatened secession. This movement is a clear signal of the tensions that would eventually lead to the Civil War. As we move forward, we'll explore how Jackson responded to this crisis. Although Jackson wasn't fond of the tariff, he prioritized the Union's integrity. He approached the situation with what's famously known as the olive branch and sword strategy. This meant offering both negotiation and then readiness to use force. On one hand, the Force Bill of 1833 empowered the federal government to use the army to collect the tariff, ensuring that nullification would not be tolerated. Simultaneously, the Compromise Tariff of 1833, negotiated by Henry Clay, proposed a lower tariff to ease tensions. This compromise led to South Carolina to rescind its nullification, preserving the Union, at least for the time being. This event was a precursor to future conflicts, as South Carolina would again challenge the Union by being the first state to secede in 1860. Are there any issues with what Jackson did with its implications for the future? Let's look at Jackson's Indian policy. During the years from 1790 to 1820, the United States saw tremendous population growth. This set the stage for President Andrew Jackson's goal of expanding territory into the Southwest, aiming to benefit Southern planters. This policy would lead to profound changes, especially for the Native American tribes. One of the key components of Jackson's policy was the Indian Removal Act of 1830. This act forced the relocation of the five, quote, civilized tribes to the lands west of the Mississippi River. These tribes included the Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw. They faced immense pressure and hardship due to this policy. It's crucial to understand the context here. The drive for expansion was fueled by economic interest and desire for land, but it came at significant human costs. As we proceed, we'll explore the aftermath of this act and the impact on native populations, as well as the legal and military conflicts that emerged. Results of the Indian Removal Act. This policy resulted in the forcible uprooting of thousands of native people. Consider the Seminole Indians, who bravely refused to leave Florida, igniting the fierce Second Seminole Wars. A significant legal battle also unfolded during this era. The Cherokee people found protection in the courts through the landmark case Worcester v. Georgia in 1832, which declared that Georgia's laws did not apply to the Cherokee Nation. The decision should have safeguarded them from forced relocation. However, President Jackson chose to ignore this ruling, famously challenging, quote, John Marshall has made his decision. Let him enforce it if he can. Ultimately, this led to the tragic Trail of Tears in 1838, where 15,000 Cherokees were forcibly removed from Georgia. This event stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of policy and the resilience of the native communities. Keep in mind that these were called the quote civilized tribes because rather than trying to fight the Americans, what they did was they tried to adapt white man's ways. So they started to farm, they wore Western clothing, they tried to do everything they could to accommodate and assimilate into the society while keeping their nation. Despite all these attempts, it proved entirely futile, and they were forced to relocate. The Bank War. In 1816, Congress granted a 20-year charter to the Bank of the United States. Fast forward to 1832, Congress, with the influential support of Henry Clay, approved a recharter. This move made the national bank a central issue in the election of 1832. Now, Jackson, known for his strong willed leadership, vetoed the recharter of the Second National Bank. This decision sparked controversy, leading to accusations of him wielding excessive power. It's fascinating because the Supreme Court had previously declared the National Bank constitutional in McCulloch v. Maryland in 1819. Jackson's actions set the stage for an economic upheaval, which we'll explore shortly. Let's look at this bank war and the resulting economic collapse. Andrew Jackson, determined to dismantle the national bank, took decisive steps before 1836. He ordered the withdrawal of all federal funds in 1833, redirecting them into what was known as pet banks. This move was significant and controversial. Bank President Nicholas Biddle's response was to call on loans, leading to widespread economic uncertainty. The tension between these actions heightened the economic instability of the time. In 1836, Jackson issued the Specie Circular, an executive order that mandated all public land purchases be made with gold or silver, hard currency. This decision was one of the contributing factors to the Panic of 1837. The panic itself was sparked by several issues, including overspeculation in Western lands, the aforementioned bank battle, and the Specie Circular. It was a time of significant turmoil and change. Understanding these events help us see how economic and political actions can have far-reaching consequences. Let's take a moment to explore the rise of new political parties in the early 19th century, particularly the Whigs and the Democrats. Starting with the Whigs, they were strong proponents of a robust central government. They supported Henry Clay's American system, which aimed at developing infrastructure and fostering economic growth. Furthermore, the Whigs were advocates of public education and moral reform movements such as the prohibition of liquor. Their support base was primarily in the New England region and among Protestant communities. In contrast, the Democrats favored a smaller national government. They believed the federal government should refrain from interfering in economic and social issues. This party found strong support in the South and West, as well as among urban workers. Understanding these differences helps us appreciate the foundation of our current political landscape. Keep in mind that both parties drew on distinct regional and ideological support, shaping their policies and influence accordingly. America's two party system, a fascinating journey through time. Let's start with the Federalist and Democratic Republicans, the two original parties. The Federalists, known for their support of a strong central government, and the Democratic Republicans, who advocated for state sovereignty. As we move forward, we'll see how the Democratic Republicans evolved into the Democrats, a party that would eventually become synonymous with supporting small national government. Meanwhile, the Whigs emerged, favoring economic modernization and moral reform, setting the stage for future debates. Remember the corrupt bargain and the Hartford Convention. These events played significant roles in reshaping political alignments and tensions. By the time we reached the era of good feelings, political identities were shifting, leading to the birth of the Republicans and new discussions around issues like slavery. Understanding these political shifts help us appreciate the complexities of modern American politics and the roots of present-day party ideologies. The struggle for Texas independence. In 1821, Mexico gained independence from Spain, marking the beginning of a new chapter. Stephen Austin was granted land in what was now Texas and given permission to settle 300 families. However, these settlers had to abide by certain conditions. They needed to be Catholic and follow Mexican law. Things took a turn in 1830 when Mexico outlawed slavery and stopped further immigration. This set the stage for rising tensions. By 1835, the first Mexican republic had collapsed, leading to Santa Anna's rise to power with the Centralist Republic of Mexico. In 1836, amidst a broader conflict, Texas declared independence. It was a tumultuous time, but Texas uniquely seceded where others didn't. Santa Anna's response was fierce, leading 6,000 troops into Texas and resulting in the tragic 13-day siege at the Alamo, where 200 Texans lost their lives. But the tides turned to the Battle of San Juanito, where Sam Houston led his force in a decisive victory. This was a pivotal moment that shaped the future of Texas. Texas annexation and the issue of it. In 1836, Texas stood as the Lone Star Republic, having asserted its independence. However, Santa Anna refused to acknowledge the treaty. By 1837, President Andrew Jackson recognized the Republic of Texas. This recognition was a significant step, but Texas wanted more. It sought admission into the Union. Now, here's the crux of the issue: the contentious topic of slavery. Admitting Texas as a state threatened to disrupt the fragile bounds between free and slave states. This delay in decision making was not just a political maneuver, it highlighted the growing divisions within the country. Consider the broader implication. How does the balancing act of power influence political decisions? Keep this question in mind moving forward. The election of 1840. This election was pivotal in shaping how political campaigns were conducted. The Whigs chose William Henry Harrison as their candidate. They cleverly used the log cabin campaign, adopting humble symbols like the log cabin and hard cider. This was a strategic move to appeal to everyday citizens. Interestingly, the Democrats decided to renominate Martin Van Buren. During the campaign, the Democratic press attempted to mock Harrison by suggesting that he was so old he should retire to a log cabin and drink hard cider. However, this insult backfired spectacularly. The Whigs turned it into a positive. using it to connect with the masses and showcase Harrison as a man of the people. This election highlights the importance of public perception and how quickly narratives can be turned on their head. What we see here is the use of campaign branding and its power in democratic elections.